hard. It was, I think, the biggest challenge I've been through in my life. I think that obviously the hardest thing that the people of South Carolina had gone through, what you had was 12 people who did what so many South Carolinians do every Wednesday night. They went to Bible study. But on this night, someone else showed up. He didn't look like them. He didn't act like them. He didn't sound like them. They didn't throw him out. They didn't call the cops. Instead, they pulled up a chair and prayed with him for an hour. And when they went to bow their heads in that last prayer, he began to shoot. These were people like Ethel Lance, whose daughter had died 2 years prior to breast cancer, and she had a broken heart. But she would go around Mother Emanuel cleaning the church singing, "One day at a time, sweet Jesus, that's all I ask of you. Give me the strength to do every day what I have to do." Our youngest victim, Tywanza Sanders, just graduated college, had the world in front of him. And on that night, he stood in front of his 87-year-old great Aunt Susie and looked at the killer and said, "You don't have to do this. We mean no harm to you." Or people like Cynthia Hurd, whose life motto was simply to be kinder than necessary. That's who these people were. They weren't famous, but they loved their church, they loved their family, they loved their community. Mother Emanuel is the oldest African American church in the South, and this was the first time we'd had a shooting in a place of worship. And the spirit of South Carolina was broken. The media came in just so aggressively, wanting to define the moment. They wanted it to be about the death penalty. They wanted it to be about racism. They wanted it to be about gun control. And I just so wanted to protect my state. And I tried to strong arm them and say, there will be a time and place where we will talk about all of those things, but it is not now. We want to get through the funerals. And the next day, the killer's manifesto came out, and there he was with the Confederate flag all over it, just spewing hate. We got through the 9 funerals. They were all open casket. You saw the loved ones just falling over their family members, and it was just a brutal time. But after the manifesto came out, I knew that this was the moment that we needed to bring the Confederate flag down. It had been a contentious debate for decades. You had many people who saw the Confederate flag and saw it as hate and slavery and evil. You had another segment of the population who didn't see it as racism. They saw it as part of their heritage and sacrifice and Southern traditions. As a governor, you don't judge your people. You don't say that one side is evil or the other. You go and try and move your state to the right direction. So after I had basically decided I wanted to bring the flag down, I talked with my husband about it to make sure I was thinking in a way that could happen. He agreed. So I asked my closest advisors to come to the residence, and I said, I want to have 4 meetings Monday morning. Don't tell them what it's about, because I knew they wouldn't show up to the meeting if they knew, because it was that controversial. And I met with a group of Republicans. The second meeting was with a group of Democrats. The third was with our congressional delegation. And the fourth was with community leaders. And I told each group, I said, I'm going to call for the flag to come down today at 4 o'clock. And if you will stand with me, I will forever be grateful. And if you don't, I won't ever let anyone know that you were in this room. And I had my husband there with me because I was so scared nobody was going to be standing with me at 4 o'clock. But I was so relieved because we had a great crowd with us. We had Strom Thurmond's son, who was a state senator. We had African-American leaders, and we went through what was a tough time. Through all of this, when the killer had to face the judge for the first time, the judge allowed the family members to speak to him. And one by one, unprompted, unplanned, they forgave him. It was the kind of forgiveness that so many of us couldn't comprehend. But we didn't have riots, we had vigils. We didn't have protests, we had hugs. And when it came time for the debate, one of the victims of the church shooting was a state senator. He was actually the pastor of the church. And when I found out about the killing, the night of the shooting, not knowing exactly what had happened, the first thing I did was call him. And I said, Senator, I just heard about the shooting at Mother Emanuel. I've got my investigators on their way there now. I will be there first thing in the morning. We'll do whatever we need for the families. I'm just so very sorry. He was supposed to be in the legislature that day. That's why I called him. And it haunts me to this day that when I called him, the phone was ringing in his pocket after he had been shot. And so the Senate quickly passed the legislation because that was their brother. The desk was covered in black fabric and the rose, and they just were broken. When we got to the House, it was much different. We had to have a 2/3 vote, which is just such a high bar to cross. And so the speaker comes and says, okay, I worked really hard. We can bring down the flag, but they want to replace it with a different version. And I said, we can't have a different version. This has caused too much pain. It has to come down. A couple of days later, after major debate, he said, look, I did the best I could do. We're going to bring the flag down. We won't put another flag up. But they want to leave the flagpole up. Now, I've served in the South Carolina legislature. I knew exactly what that meant. What that meant was, as soon as all the TV cameras went away, they were going to go and put that flag right back up. And so I said, we're not going to have a flagpole. He said, well, I can't move them. This is the way it's going to be. So I went to go speak to them. And when I talked to them, and I talk about this in the book, I said, I want to tell you a story. And I told them the story about when my dad asked me if I wanted to go to Columbia, which was the capital city, if I wanted to ride with him. It was an hour drive, and I was like, yes, I want to go. I was all excited. And he loved to stop at farmer stands. He always loved to buy produce straight from the farmers. And we stopped by this produce stand, and he was getting fruits and vegetables. And I see the people at the register acting really nervous. And the next thing I do is I see them on the phone. And then 2 police cars fly up. And the police get out and they go to them at the register and they're looking at my dad. And my dad finishes what he's doing, and then he goes to the register and he pays and he thanks them. And we get back in the car, and my dad didn't speak to me the whole way home. And I know he was hoping I didn't notice. And I told those House members, I said, I'm governor now, and every time I pass that produce stand, I feel pain. No one that drives by our state house should feel pain. They went back in, they debated, and the flag came down. And the people of South Carolina stepped up in a way that showed true strength and grace to the entire world when you're faced with a tragedy.
A very personal revelation in the book, talking